Ladies and gentlemen, Masa al-Khair. It is not often that you find yourself tasked with celebrating a legend, a friend, a mentor, and a scholar, all rolled into one. Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn, or Abd, or the Sultan, as we fondly called him, was all these and more. Today, as we gather to launch this memorial volume in the steps of the Sultan, I find myself grappling with mixed emotions. Joy, certainly joy, for the privilege of having known him, having been his companion for many years, but also sorrow for the void his passing has left behind. Abd had a sparkling charm that could light up the darkest of archives. And believe me, we've seen a few during our many trips to Turkey. He was the man who could find humor in the dusty corners of Ottoman decrees and the dry footnotes of history books. And yet, his laughter never undermined the gravity of his scholarship. If history was a serious court, Abd was both the wise judge and the witty court jester. He often reminded me with a smirk, and I imagine if he were here today and I would give him this book, علم لا ينفع وجهالة لا تضر. Knowledge that does not benefit and ignorance that does not harm. He often said that when I proudly presented him one of my own publications, keeping me real. This statement always puzzled me. Despite this sarcasm, Abd was always brewing new projects, his scholarly zeal undiminished by the years. With time, I realized his belief, what he actually meant by this statement, is that we pursue knowledge not for mere utility, not for nafa' and dur, but for the joy of discovery, the spark of curiosity, and the fulfillment of our human essence. His office was a cabinet of curiosities, a majestic poster of Ottoman sultans, a toghra, and an ever-growing wall of heartfelt notes and pictures. These were not mere decorations. They were the chapters of his life, each telling stories of struggle, pride, and unyielding pursuit of truth. My friend Nadia always called him a survivor. He's always survived until the end. But Abd was more than just a historian. He was a mentor who conjured scholarly networks with the ease of a master weaver. Young scholars, peers, and even the occasional lost tourist found guidance and inspiration in his words. His stories infused with proverbs, history, punchlines, and literal failed translations, and here I'll put on your eyes, drew us in, taught us, and more often than not, had us doubled over in laughter. Remembering Abd today, I think of our drives to Saida to indulge in knefe nabelsi. His insistence that the only baklawa worth eating came from Amal Bohsali. This is for you. And that ice cream has negative calories. He had a whole scientific explanation for it. I think of how he ate half a manoushi every day, always sharing the other half with me. His humor was as integral to his teaching as his profound insights. He taught us that history is not just about understanding the past, it's about challenging it, questioning it, and yes, even finding joy in its complexities. Yet today, as I stand here, the laughter is bittersweet. We've lost a pillar of scholarship, a beacon of integrity, and a truly magnificent friend. Abd's legacy, however, is ineffaceable. It is etched in the volumes of work he leaves behind, in the minds and hearts he shaped, and in this memorial volume too, a tribute to both the historian and the man. Abd always held Palestine close to his heart and mind. In these turbulent times, I find some solace in knowing he was spared the pain of witnessing the ongoing war and genocide that would have grieved him deeply. His son, Tariq, continues his journey as a historian of the Ottoman Empire at AUB, upholding the scholarly lineage with great pride. Tariq, you had to share your father with all of us, really, with me in particular. You'll always be a brother. People have traveled. People have traveled from far and wide to be here today, a testament to the profound impact Abd had on so many lives. This book, A Labor of Love, includes contributions from scholars across the globe, reflecting the wide-reaching influence of his work and the diverse community of thinkers he brought together from really, literally all over the globe. Abd was pivotal in creating a community of support and love at AUB. We often sat in his office or his apartment, where he dispensed advice, offered corrections when needed, and stood by my side during challenging times. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to my co-editor, Tylor Brand, Abid's PhD graduate, for his meticulous work. I'm not a historian, and I could not have realized this tribute to Abd without his help. Abid's niece, Hiba Turman, and his student, Charles Hayek, took care of him during his last days. Their devotion is an example for all. So many loved him dearly that it is hard to name them all, but many of them are here in this room today. So as we turn the pages of this volume in the steps of the Sultan, let's remember Abd, not just for the depth of his knowledge, but for the warmth of his spirit and the joy he brought into our lives. Abd may have left us, but his stories, his laughter, and his legacy will forever be part of the halls of this university and this particular building, which he loves dearly and beyond. Thank you. I want to name the contributors in this volume, because Abd always taught us to give credit to the people who make things happen. Michael Provence, of course, Tufan Bospinar, James Relly, Alexis Wick, Helen Sadir, Samir Saikaly, Tobias Morke, Tylor Brand, Charles Hayek, Elizabeth Thompson, Khalid Rouayhib, Suleiman Murad, Nadia Maria Sheikh, Mario Kozah, Abdulrahman Chamseddine, Rana Siblini, Barbara Kilner Henkeli, Makram Rabah. Many also sent their contributions late or who couldn't finish on time, but they were eager to participate in this volume. Our first speaker today, so there will be a panel at, first, then memories of Abdul Rahim Abu-Husayn, and our panel speakers are Michael Provence, Suleiman Murad, and Helen Sadir, all colleagues of Abdul Rahim. We will start with Michael. Michael Provence is a professor of history at the University of California, San Diego. He is the author of The Great Syrian Revolt, University of Texas Press, 2005, and The Last Ottoman Generation, Cambridge University Press, 2017. Both books have been translated to Arabic and Turkish. He was a visiting assistant professor at the American University of Beirut from 2005-2006, and has visited often since. He cherishes his connection to AUB and the Department of History and Archaeology. Please join me in welcoming Michael Provence.
Thank you, Bilal. My connection to AUB is the thing I cherish most in my career. And it's thanks to Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn who invited me and encouraged me to come and wrote me an email, which I remember still, that said something like, "Yes, you can come. You seem to generate good news." So this is time marches on. And it doesn't spare any of us. Today I had a Beirut ritual. I went book shopping, and I found wonderful books, but I forgot my glasses, my reading glasses, and I couldn't read them. So we're not spared by the time marching on. Today we gather to honor and to remember our friend, colleague, teacher, mentor, Dr. Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn. And I was honored beyond words by his friendship and encouragement over many years. And I'm honored beyond words that my dear friends Bilal, Orfali, and Nadia, Sheikh, and Tylor Brand invited me to come and to help celebrate his work and his life and his legacy with them. So I'll say a few things about our friend, his influence, importance, and uniqueness in our field, and his personal significance to me as a historian and as a person. History is serious business. In Lebanon and everywhere, really. But that doesn't mean historians should take themselves too seriously. And Abid, like Kamal Salibi, his teacher, never took themselves too seriously. We all knew the story he loved about Dr. Salibi's historical protagonists, plucked from the archives and obscurity and delivered into another kind of obscurity. So this is the lot of the historian, to labor in obscurity for the sake of obscurity. Except Abid, like Dr. Salibi, and like those of us who he taught, knew very well that history was serious business, and that the arguments we take and make and the positions we take can affect not only understandings and meanings of the past, but meanings and interpretations sometimes, and even actions, heaven forbid, of the present. It's a responsibility not to take lightly, interpreting, writing, and teaching the meaning of the past. And he didn't take it lightly. And yet, serious business or not, he had no time for historians who took themselves too seriously. And he didn't hide or try to hide his disdain for historians who did take themselves too seriously. And I think he also liked to repeat the story about Dr. Salibi solemnly telling him at the time of his defense that scholarship without humility is worthless. Also without jokes, funny stories, and amusing anecdotes, not worth doing otherwise. And I suspect that both Abid and Kamal Salibi would agree that those who tend to take themselves too seriously are also those most likely to take their responsibilities to truth and to accuracy and to integrity too lightly among those who practice the profession of history. Most of his scholarly work focused on the early modern Arab Ottoman lands, especially Lebanon. Remember what I mentioned about humility? When I was preparing to submit an article for the volume that's so beautifully produced by Bilal and Tylor and Amelie, I asked for a CV so that I could read some of his articles. He ignored me. So I asked again, and he ignored me. And I asked a third time, and he ignored me. And finally, it was like pulling teeth. Finally, I got a list of publications. It took a long time. I asked, I think, 4 times. Of course, it's an astonishing list of achievement and publications covering a huge variety of areas of interest and centuries of historical inquiry. In a field full of professional self-promoters, he was charmingly terrible at self-promotion. But people loved him as a person, admired him for his work, and gravitated towards him anyway. I remember very fondly walking the streets of this city, and there were people everywhere who knew him of every walk of life and greeted him with the greatest of joy and fondness. His astonishing corpus of work fits beautifully within a long tradition of AUB historical work, historical scholarship interpreting the region, its people and their history on their own terms, and not in deficient relation to some mostly imagined and idealized West. And of course, this is also a tradition that he shared with Dr. Salibi. And with the delightful and sometimes gleeful skepticism and iconoclasm that they shared. He was interested in an unusually broad variety of areas: Ottoman relations with Arab provinces, the formative period in Lebanese national myth-making, and regional political dynasties, which he eventually summarized in a short book called Rebellion, Myth-Making, and Nation-Building, Lebanon from an Ottoman iltizam to a nation-state in 2009, and expanded in 2019 into a much larger and more voluminous book in Arabic. He wrote about Syriac and Arabic writers and their works, education, both Ottoman and eventually missionary education, late Ottoman interactions between the people of Bilad al-Sham and the state, and the thing that we shared, which was most closely, Howdan and the Howdan Druze, which, apart from some brief articles written by Engin Akarla, had only been treated from the perspective of Arabic sources. So he was the first to take any of these areas, or many of these areas, from the perspective of the Central Ottoman Archives. His great friend Engin Akarla was the other person who pioneered this work. But there are, and have been for a long time, historians of the Arab Ottoman world who either were able to read and use Ottoman archives in Istanbul, or who used local sources in Arabic. But the number of people who did both and felt comfortable in both source corpuses was vanishingly small, and remains vanishingly small. And Abd was the pioneer of this work. There were many historians of the Arab lands working in the Ottoman archives who were not at home in the Arab world or could use Arabic sources. So he was the person who pioneered this work, this important work, and was able to bridge this world. He also was a great enthusiast for Turkey and for Istanbul. He had been, as Suleiman, or as Bilal mentioned a moment ago, a refugee from Palestine, though I never heard him call himself a refugee, but he was a refugee from Palestine, and he came and became a Beiruti, and Beirut became his home. And he went to Turkey, and Turkey became his home. He would say, "You are most welcome in Istanbul," or "You are most welcome in Beirut," or then a joke that he was very fond of, making fun of some long ago member of the history department, "You are mostly welcome." You are mostly welcome. He had the enthusiasm of the convert for Turkey. And this was something else we shared, because I have the enthusiasm of the convert for Beirut and for Damascus and for Lebanon and for Syria. Sometimes Turkish friends thought his enthusiasm was a little bit too much, And sometimes he thought my enthusiasm was a little bit too much. He eventually became a Turkish citizen, which to some, in the age of Erdogan, was a dubious quest. And in a similar way, he indulged my sometimes naive enthusiasm for Beirut, Damascus, and Bilad al-Sham. Well, I mean, more than indulged, because he's really the person responsible for me coming here in the first place and coming back all of these many times. So this is a gift that is really the most precious gift of my entire life, I would say. Once he said to me in his booming, joyful voice, "You are more Arab nationalist than any Arab, Michael." I was very proud. I think it was a compliment, mostly. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I also would like to thank the University Press and also the Sheikh Zayed Chair for funding this book and this series. It's an open access series by the University Press, and this is the second volume. I want to name Emily Bayham, who worked tirelessly on this volume with most of the communication. It was really her. Rami Yassin also did the layout for the volume, beautiful layout, and just the way Abid would have liked it, right? Even everything from the design, from the paper, from the font, it's what Abid liked. And Abid knew about this volume because it was a festschrift. But then it became a memorial volume. And I would also like to thank Yasmin Hajjar and Dana also from the University Press. It was truly a labor of love. And our second speaker, Dr. Suleiman Murad, who will talk about Abdulrahim as a teacher. And Suleiman is the Mira M. Sampson Professor of Religion and Middle East Studies at Smith College. His research focuses on Islamic history, religious thought, and legal traditions in the medieval and modern periods. His publications include The Mosaic of Islam, 2016, and the Muslim sources of the Crusader period. We also know his early work on Al-Hasan al-Basri. He also writes op-eds and contributions to podcasts and documentaries on historical and current issues. Please join me in welcoming Suleiman Murad one more time to AUB.
Thank you so much, Bilal, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. First, I would like to join my voice to my colleagues, thanking everyone who was behind the production of the volume. It is a great honor for me to have taken part in it, but we all know that such efforts are little gestures in honor of people who make tremendous impacts on us. So I'm thankful also for people behind the scene who make such works possible. And also for whoever got involved in the organization of our invitations and the logistical details. That's also very appreciated. Thank you. Ustaz Abd, the teacher. The teacher's death is painful, no doubt, no matter how much we try to cover it with eloquent words or existential philosophies. The loss is doubled if the teacher is a colleague, friend, and companion. Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn was all of these to me and many in this room and who couldn't be here today. We studied under him, we learned from his research, and were greatly inspired by his approach and methodology in the study of history, especially the local history. He imparted on us many wisdoms, most important of which is not to take ourselves, as my colleagues here said, too seriously, and to be wary of the traps of scholarly egos as pompous air is pumped into our heads with experience, exposure, and accolades. and that we should maintain the spark of a student eager to keep learning. And in this way, he lit many candles that still illuminate in his absence. I first met Ustaz Abd, this is how we called him, in 1989, when I took his course on Lebanese history. At that time, the history department was starting to witness a boom in majors, especially at the MA level. But unlike the senior professors in the department, who were very well established in their respective fields and known among the scholarly community in the region and globally, Ustaz Abd was still an assistant professor, juggling the demands of his young career as a scholar and teacher. One characteristic made him more approachable to us. The other professors we looked at as father figures, but Ustaz Abd was closest to us in age, so we looked at him as an older brother. His love of travel and good food brought us even closer to him, so we would go with him to many places in Lebanon or around the region. I remember several trips to Damascus, Amman, and Istanbul. In his company, we infused the joy of feasting with the intellectual rigor of talking about history. And many restaurants became the setting of extensive discussions. They were an extension of the classroom in some ways. I could even say our classrooms were often shaped with conversations and interests that started or were first broached around a meal that we had in the Os or Burj al Hamam or somewhere like that, or even in Damascus. And it was largely the excitement about his new research and discoveries in the Ottoman archives that lit our interests as young students. And these things turned upside down many of the myths and legends that we had learned in school. And that's what made us receptive ears to learn new things, that we were eager to go back home and disprove our parents' knowledge. During one of the most impactful seminars he taught us, I mean here the graduate course Arab Historians of the Ottoman Period. If I'm not mistaken, we took it in the spring of 1992. We were individually tasked with parsing a major local historian. Each one of us adopted a historian and were supposed to tear them apart. I remember Khalid Ruwayhib wrote a paper on Al-Hasan al-Burini, which he described to me on a conversation we had recently and on several occasions, that the course that it changed the course of his academic life. Some of you probably know Khalid. His interests were largely in philosophy and some kind of intellectual history. But the study of Burini opened him up to the early modern period in ways that he would never have imagined before, and made him more interested to read more about it, and that led to his MA dissertation at AUB and PhD thesis later on at Cambridge, out of which came his book, Before Homosexuality in the Arab Islamic World. Malik Shalif also considers this to be one of his most impactful courses he took at AUB. As a vignette from that class, Malik gave a presentation on Al-Budayr al-Hallaq, that was a historian who he was supposed to study. And you probably know that Al-Budayr al-Hallaq wrote Hawadith Dimashq al-Yawmiyya. And Malik gave a presentation during the class describing the characteristics of the book and its content. He reached in the presentation that part where the Damascene barber reports on an official parade in Damascus to probably welcome the new wali. And there were these that Malik struggled to read: Shalkat, Shilkat, Sham, Shulkat, Sham, lining up around. And obviously Malik thinking that these must be nobilities in Damascus. And Abd started laughing and turned to Malik and said, "Say it in colloquially, it is Shlikat Sham." Malik blushed from double embarrassment. First, it's something not befitting of a graduate student to say, and also his embarrassment of being naive. That course also was transformative for me and for my career, I should say. I was extremely fascinated in Lebanese history to start with, but that course changed everything. My topic was the great Maronite patriarch Istvan Dwayhi. And the future saint must have sensed, predicted possibly, that my paper was going to tear him apart, parse through his forgery of history and expose him as a forger. So Dwayhi must have summoned heavenly bodies to strike me with vengeance, divine vengeance. And at the end of the semester, actually, I fell ill for a week. I couldn't finish the paper. I called Ustaz Abd and said, I need an extension. He said, no, I'm not going to give you an extension. I said, I'm sick, I can't sit. He demanded to see me. So Malik volunteered to drive him to my house. He came. And I suspect it has nothing to do with the illness. It has to do with the fact that my mother, according to Ustaz Abd, she makes the best atayif bijous. So he was angling for some atayif bijous rather than verifying my story. But that incident actually made me realize that Lebanese history is not for me. If I dare to criticize Dwayhi and I receive such a divine disfavor, how if I attack all of the Lebanese myth, then for no fault whatsoever of Ustaz Abd, I sought refuge in the oases of Arabia and the rubu' of Futuh literature, as some of you know. And I kept my distance from saints and all forms of holy people, men and women of the cloth and the likes. And for those of you who do not know it, because probably the matter was kept serious, my sickness actually was one of the miracles that were investigated by the Vatican before the sanctification of the Dwayhi. So you know the far-reaching repercussions and impacts of Ustaz Abd's courses. That course with Ustad Abd generated a trip we took together with him to Damascus. I remember he, Malik Sharif, Khalid Rawayhib, and I took a car and stayed 4 days in Damascus. And he introduced us there to many of the landmarks of the Ottoman period: mosques, palaces, madrasas, hammams, etc., souks. Even we went to some libraries and did some look at old manuscripts. It was really impactful. During that trip, he stressed to us the importance of the Ottoman archives and the need for young scholars like us to research it deeply and study it in detail, because it contains unrivaled information relating to the history of Bilad al-Sham in general and Lebanon to some extent that would expose the fallacies of national and ideological narratives. So we placed him under the following command: حطيناه تحت الأمر الواقع, and demanded that he teaches us Osmani. And look and behold, Ustaz Abd obliged and offered the course on Ottoman language, which, if I'm not mistaken, he never taught after and he never taught before. That tells you how much he was invested with the interest of his student. The enrollment was one of the highest graduate courses he gave. We were all curious. I think we were probably 13 or 15 in that course. And it was a turning point in the life and career of classmates, definitely Malik Sharif, who went on to do further work on Uthmani with Ustaz Abd, and later on he went to Istanbul to study it further, and that out of which came his MA and doctoral dissertation on the Ottoman Wilaya of Beirut. I also recall how impactful Ustaz Abd was on drawing our attention to aspects of regional history that we were not familiar with and did not initially appreciate. I specifically mean here the importance of social and agrarian history, which we find exposed through the Tabu Daftaris, some of the most instrumental sources for the study of social and economic history in rural Bilad al-Sham, even for population study, agriculture, and rural life in general. It felt a breath of fresh air when we start studying it with her, with Professor Abu-Husayn, in comparison to the classical emphasis on chronicles and biographical dictionaries, which were largely by elites and about elites to a large extent. That course actually on Tabu Daftari inspired me to write a paper with Dr. Saikaly on silk trade in Mount Lebanon, which, if I'm not mistaken, and Professor Saikaly is here to correct me, this was the best paper I wrote to Professor Saikaly, and the best grade he gave me, B+. For the record, this is the best grade I ever got, period, throughout my entire career, because I know what B+ meant for Professor Saikaly. This would have been A++ for any other professor. But again, La'nat al-Duwayhi kept me away from Lebanese history, the joys of the Tabu Daftaris and other registers, and what would have been an assured success. I kept reminding myself that becoming a historian of Mount Lebanon was not meant to be. Ustaz Abd's passion for reading was also contagious, and he left a tremendous legacy among many of us about the need to read. A historian should be a good reader and also good reader of novels. And this is not strange for someone who specialized in English literature before moving on to the field of history. I remember that the late Kamal Salibi was the first to call me Solomon. And it remains till now the name my professors here call me. I remember that one day when I arrived at the department, Ustaz Abd greeted me saying, Sabah al-Khair, Sir Solomon Philbrick. I was pleased with the bourgeois promotion, but I did not understand who in the hell is this Solomon Philbrick and why I was compared to him. Ustaz Abd clarified that Solomon Philbrick is one of the characters in Evelyn Waugh's book Decline and Fall, and I should read it one day, and that he was known for his craftiness and many talents. I accepted the honor with great pleasure, saying to myself, Seet ghina wala seet far, as the adage goes. But I didn't find the time to actually read the book. When I received the sad news about Ustaz Abd passing, I was actually in London at the conference. The minute I returned to Northampton, I went to Smith Library and checked out Decline and Fall and read it in 2 days. It brought a big smile to my face. The only regret is that I didn't read it during his life to talk about it with him. Ustaz Abd was also fond of humor, as many of you know. And one thing I remember he used to love a lot, I already gave you a vignette of that, was jokes about lousy translations of famous sayings. Like, he came and saved the parking lot. جاء وأنقذ الموقف. Or to put on someone's eye, حط على عينه. He also used to make us funny stories. Actually, he used to invent funny stories. Oftentimes, by the way, the ingredients were completely accurate, except that there is a punchline, and he was, as Abdulrahim Chamseddine here would say, he was perfect in the punchline. One of those, probably some of you have heard, is that one day Malik Sharif, he was going out of his way to try to angle a German graduate student who was in Beirut for research, trying to invite her to talk to her. She was never impressed. Finally, I don't know, probably he got the director of the German Institute to intervene for him. The student accepted. As they were driving to dinner in a restaurant, Malik had a flat tire, and he stopped, and by that time, I was passing by Malik. This is where the punchline that Dr. Abd introduced, that I took off with the German graduate student and left Malik attend to his flat ego. But what was most beautiful about Ustaz Abd, the teacher, did not unfold in the classroom or during conversation with him. It actually transpired by monitoring his relationship with his own teacher, Kamal Salibi in particular. Especially when the roles were reversed and the student became the teacher. There is nothing strange about this, but it's not very common, unfortunately, in the norms of the academic life, although in theory, this should be the norm rather than the exception. Ustaz Abd's research, as you all know, on Lebanese history was so pioneering and transformative, and he achieved it by delving into the Ottoman archives in Istanbul and studying sources that nobody studied before or nobody bothered to study before. And this effort led Ustaz Abd to unearth many facts different from the common myths, some of which exposed errors in Kamal Salibi's own writings and opinions regarding the history of Mount Lebanon. There was a teaching moment, that the student should not shirk from confronting his teacher's mistakes if facts emerge to that end. It instilled in us the conviction that honoring the teacher is not achieved by turning the student into a parrot, repeating his professor's theories or defending his professor's shortcomings, but rather by opening new horizons and correcting what needs to be corrected, confirming what can be confirmed, etc. Jiddu Saba, which is the nickname given to Dr. Salibi by Ustaz Abd's children, used to repeat to us with great pride that a successful teacher must produce students who are more brilliant than he. This was, in a nutshell, Ustaz Abd. And for that, I and many of my classmates and later generations, and I'm sure many in this room, are ever indebted to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Suleiman. This brought a lot of memories. And our third speaker is Professor Helen Sadir. Helen, when I invited her, she said, I remember I'm an archaeologist, I'm not a historian, but I want to participate. And she was one of the first to send her also papers. So Professor Helen Sadir is tenured professor of archaeology in the Department of History and Archaeology at the American University of Beirut. She received her PhD in Assyriology and Northwest Semitic epigraphy from the University of Tübingen in 1984. Her main research interests are the archaeology and history of Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, mainly the Iron Age, and the Phoenician epigraphy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Helen Sadir.
Thank you very much. I'm really very happy to be here today to honor Abd. Abd, my colleague and my friend, I can say. And I am unfortunately not his student, never been. And I don't know all these nice stories that everybody is telling about him, and I'm not a historian to be able to speak about his achievements as a historian. But I want to say something about Abd, my colleague and my friend. I met him, you know, when I was appointed in the Department of History and Archaeology in October 1985. But back then, you have to know that the archaeologists were exiled in Post Hall and the historians were here in College Hall. So I had hardly any chance to meet Abd, you know, more often. And the only encounters were during the departmental meetings. So it is only when we moved to College Hall after it was restored, and it was the first time that historians and archaeologists, you know, were working in the same building and on the same floor. And this has changed my relationship with Abd because it is the opportunity we had back then the proximity of our officers, the fact that we could have coffee breaks, in the lobby of the department. We talked about all sorts of things, and mainly, academic issues, political issues, social issues, and of course, we always discussed our salaries and our pension. This was a major topic. But it is during these late 1990s and early 2000s that I got to know Abdul Rahim, the scholar and the man. I progressively realized all of a sudden, as if I was meeting somebody I had never met before, from our conversations, from hearing about his publications, from the opinions of his peers here in Lebanon and abroad, how unanimously appreciated and respected he was among his peers everywhere. All those who spoke about Abd spoke about him, with enthusiasm, with respect, and with, deference. A testimony to his international reputation and expertise, and the invitations he received from various universities in the US, in Europe, here, in the Middle East, invitations, to share the results of his research all over, everywhere. I also realized that this unanimous appreciation was not only for his scholarship, but also for his generous personality and for his integrity. And I'm not plagiarizing Bilal. I had written this before he said the same. He had what the French call a franc-parler, that is a straight talk and a frankness, and he expressed bluntly his opinions without ever getting offensive, but he said it straightforward. I don't like your dress. So he had, a very, he said always what he had, what passed by his mind. But I distinctly remember that, his office, as some of you have already mentioned, was a sort of intellectual salon in the department where graduate students, colleagues, and friends gathered around him to discuss, to chat, to make jokes, and also to talk about serious matters. In the early 2020s, several of our historian colleagues left AUB, and I became the only senior historian of the department. As chairperson, I found in Abdul Rahim invaluable wisdom, which helped me navigate and make, some sound decisions when it came to matters relating to history. I'm not a historian, and I needed somebody, a knowledgeable, wise person to help me take the correct decisions, about these things. And Abd was always there in all matters of recruitment, curriculum, all sorts of problems that we met in the department. He was my advisor, my counselor. He was, his opinion was always sound, was always objective, and always informed. He was very well informed. And his sudden death was not only a great loss for his family and his friends, but he left the department without the central pillar that held, the fort in the critical period we were, witnessing. Abd, and I can call him today my friend, was an admirable scholar and an endearing person. He had something in him, that made people like him immediately and get, be at ease with him. But most impressive was his dignity to me. In all circumstances, I often told him that I admire the serenity with which he met the difficulties that faced him. He never complained about the series of serious illnesses he had to fight. Never. And despite, his son's Kamal's tragic loss, he never started whining or became a whining person, pitying himself and complaining about his malheur. He was a very dignified person, not a word. عبد الرحيم أبو قلب كبير وعقل كبير ونفس كبيرة. We miss you. May you rest in peace.
Thank you, Professor Sader. We will now move to the second part of our event, which is memories of Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn. And in the room, we have family members, we have colleagues, we have students, staff, you name it. And I compiled the list because I knew that this list of people will be in Beirut. But feel free after they speak to also share memories of Abed. He belonged to us all. We shared him all. So please also feel free to join the group. I will start with his son, Tarek. If you want to come here, if you want to speak from there, whatever you prefer. Okay. Tarek also joined, he's a Harvard graduate, and he recently joined the Department of History and Archaeology. He's also an Ottomanist. بس يعني ينطبق عليه لن أعيش في جلباب أبي. Right? He is a scholar in his own with different interests, really fascinating. Please, Tarek.
Okay, thank you so much, Bilal. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone here present today for celebrating the life and career of my father. And I congratulate all of you who were involved in the planning, production, and contribution to this wonderful volume. This Festschrift is truly a wonderful accomplishment in its own right. And I appreciate it especially as, you know, my father's son, because it is more a project of the heart. It is a project of wonderfully kind, generous, and loving hearts. It is much more that than it is a project of the mind and of the intellect. So, and I know this is supposed to be a celebration, so I sincerely apologize for my over-emotionality, for my tears. And I hope what I say does not kind of dampen anyone's spirits. But this Festschrift and this event today and leading up to it has, for reasons I'm still not entirely aware of, given me a sense of sobriety, somberness, whatever you want to call it. And it's one that I haven't really expressed or felt since I was in the US a bit less than 2 years ago when I first received the shocking news of my father's passing. I know that those of you who contributed to this volume were greatly saddened that it was not released, you know, during my father's lifetime, that, you know, kind of death robbed him of this celebration. But in some strange sense, if I may be allowed to say something somewhat outrageous, I think it was almost poetically fitting that my father's Festschrift only saw the light of day after his death, much like his mentor Kamal Salibi, whose Festschrift was released several years after his death. In fact, they started work on it several years after his death, if memory serves. And it is almost poetically fitting, as I said, that their fates are intertwined in death as they seem to have been in life. And you know, truth be told, among the many virtues my father possessed, as a couple of you have said already today, humility was probably the greatest of those many virtues. And I suspect that he would have been too humble not to be embarrassed with the kind of language that you know, with which he has been described today, and by the fact that so many great scholars collaborated to produce this truly wonderful volume. Embarrassed as he may have been by the academic heft of this volume and, you know, everything going on today, I am certain that he now looks upon us all, upon you, whether you knew him or not, and upon everyone who contributed to this wonderful volume. Looks upon us all, upon you especially, as laborers of love. This is truly a labor of love. For basically what you have done with this book and with this event is to honor my father for his other great virtue, definitely rivaling his humility, and that is his unlimited capacity to love. There is this great wisdom about the human heart, of course, being this agent of love, and the heart being a limitless reservoir, in the sense that if you love one person, the love for that one person is undiminished by your love for another person, and so on and so forth. It just keeps growing. And in fact, in some ways, it keeps growing when you love every other person. And my father was such an epitome of that love. I kept seeing his quote-unquote entourage growing over the years, when eventually it included people I had never even met, because I had not been to Lebanon for almost 3 years when he passed away. And so I'm sure, because my father was such a loving person, and also a person who took himself, again, not too seriously, as everyone so far has said, I'm sure that as great a scholar as he truly was, he actually cares far less about the scholarship in this book as about its nature, as the great testament of love and gratitude that you have all shown him in death as well as in life. Because my father knew that, above all things, living a successful, joyful life was about cultivating and maintaining relationships of love. So, one very good demonstration of that, and I'm sorry about this the somber tone and somber story I'm about to tell, is I remember in 2017, as he was about to go through one of his innumerable life-threatening surgeries. He had a lung surgery back then, and to remove a cancerous tumor, which luckily could be surgically operated. I remember seeing my friend and dear brother, Abdulrahim Chamseddine, in the department, inconsolable. Was about to weep, and I had to console him. And this, to me, really spoke of the love that my father, Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn, imparted onto others. And they loved him back with the same great depth. And everyone who has met him, everyone who has spoken so far, everyone who I'm sure wishes to speak, I am sure he's absolutely proud of all of you. I hope he's proud of me too. And he cannot be more overjoyed at the great love you have all expressed to him during his life after his death. And I thank you all as his son. But in many ways, many of you are his adopted sons, his adopted brothers, his adopted cousins, whatever you want to name it. So thank you all on behalf of the family too. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Abid had a great love for the Arabic language. He always took my Arabic novels and then gifted them to someone else. He has insisted on teaching Lebanese history in Arabic in the history department. He also taught a class on Lebanese history through the Arabic novel in the Arabic department. And for this, I have asked my own mentor, Ramzi Baalbaki, to speak in Arabic as a tribute also to Abid, Dr. Baalbaki.
A speech written with affection, for me at least, should be written in one's own native language, in this case, Arabic. لم يكن عبد الرحيم من طينة من تصادفهم كل يوم، ولعل أصدق ما يوصف به هو قول العرب: إنه نسيج وحده. ولئن استوقفتك فيه سجايا وخصال فريدة، فأميز ما يتميز به صراحته ومباشرته، اللتان ربما بلغتا في أحوال بعينها حد القساوة والمباغتة. قد يخال بعضهم أن ذلك لخشونة فيه أو لرعونة، ولكن مرد ذلك إنما هو إلى أنه كان شديد التمسك بقول رأيه، وإن خالف فيه إجماعاً أو نفر منه أقواما. وما هذا إلا ثمرة تعلقه بالحق كما يراه، ولا غرابة إذ ذاك أن يكون هذا الجانب من شخصيته قد وازته جرأة في اقتحام الموضوعات التي دارت عليها كتبه ومصنفاته. جرأة في الرأي وقول الحق حيثما كان. وهنا أسأل: وهل يقاس الأكاديمي إلا بجرأة الرأي والتعلق بالحق ومجافاة الموقف المتلون والحكم الرجراجي المائع؟ ما كان أروع تلك اللحظات التي كنت أقضيها معه في مكتبه معظم الوقت وفي مكتبي أحيانا. نتجاذب أطراف الحديث فيسر لي وأسر له، وغالبا ما كان يمدح فلانا حتى يجعله في أعلى عليين، حتى لتخاله أنه ملك من الملائكة، ثم لا يلبث أن يعرج على ذكر آخر فيذمه وبحق حتى ينحط إلى أسفل سافلين، وكأن الله لم يخلق أرذل منه وألصق بالتراب. فلا أنصاف مواقف عنده. الدنيا في عينيه شعبتان: شعبة الحق التي تستحق أن تجاهر بها وتذب عنها، وشعبة الباطل التي عليك ألا تتهيب مواجهتها وصدها. وقد كان في الحالين ظهيراً للحق وسيفاً مسلولاً على الباطل. كل ذلك والدعابة ديدنه، فلا تكاد تفارقه. ولطالما سألني عن حالي فأقول له: لا بأس. ثم إن سألته: وكيف أنت؟ يقول لي: بأس. وفي تلك التفاتة لطيفة جدا إلى لا نافية للجنس، وكأنه يقول، وقد قالها مرة: إنك لو وضعت 1000 لا نافية للجنس قبل كلمة بأس فلن تلغي البأس من حياتنا، وهو صحيح. وكم من مرة، وهذا ما قد سمعه بعضكم دون شك، كان يغير شطر البيت المعروف الجاهلي مشعشعة كأن الحص فيها ليناسب الحديث. فإن كان الحديث عن المجدرة مثلا يصبح البيت مجدرة كأن الحص فيها. وفي إحدى جلساته غضب أحد الجالسين منه من عبد الرحيم لرأي قاله، فصاح ذلك الرجل: يا قرد! فما كان من عبد الرحيم إلا أن انتفض وقال: مشعشعة كأن القرد فيها. فسري عن الرجل وزال غضبه وراح يعانقه. وكان عبد الرحيم يشفع كل دعابة بضحكة طفل تشع منها الطيبة وتفوح منها البراءة. أخي عبد الرحيم، قد يطول الحديث عنك وحقك علينا لم يوفى بعد، فلكم غفرت لمسيء، ولكم أحسنت إلى محتاج، ولكم ناصرت من ذل وهان، ولكم غضبت ثم خمت فعفوت عمن أغضبك. ويطيب لي في ختام كلمتي أخي عبد الرحيم أن أذكرك بما يروى عن الخليفة المأمون، وهو أنه لما سمع مخارق، المغني البغدادي الشهير، عندما سمع مخارق ينشد قول أبي العتاهية: وإني لمشتاق إلى ظل صاحب، لم يقل مشتاق إلى صاحب، وإني لمشتاق إلى ظل صاحب يروق ويصفو إذ كدرت عليه، نحن نكدر وهو يصفو. عندما سمع المأمون هذا البيت سأل مخارق 7 مرات أن يعيد إنشاده عليه، فلما فرغ من الإعادة التفت المأمون إلى مخارق وقال: يا مخارق، خذ مني الخلافة وأعطني هذا الصاحب. أخي عبد الرحيم، ليس عندي خلافة فأعطيها، ولكنني أخاطب الدهر فأقول: خذ مني ما شئت وأعطني جلسة واحدة مع عبد الرحيم، حتى إذا كدرت عليه راق علي وصفى. شكرا لكم.
شكرا دكتور بالبكي على سيرة الشعر، كان دائما يردد هكذا هكذا وإلا فلا لا. I have included Tylor Brand because he's my co-editor and I didn't have the heart to remove him. And another time I thank him for his patience with me, for everything that he has taught me, and for accepting to be my co-editor in this volume. He couldn't be here for a family emergency, but he's here with us in spirit, and I promised to send him also the video. Now we reach Rahman, Chamseddine. Rahman, assistant professor at University of Georgetown, Qatar, a lover of baklawa and of Abdul Rahim, from Amal Bahsali. We always visited him to eat food in Saida, always welcomed us, and we all felt part of your family. Abdulrahman.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you, everyone. I'm not sure if I can make it, actually, and tell you all the memories that I want to share with you today. By now, I think most of you know that the relation between me and Professor Abu-Husayn, he literally made me who I am today. I can even speak English because of him. Anyway, I'll tell you funny stories so that I managed to tell. Talking about poetry and kunafa, the famous verses from ميسون زوجة معاوية: لبيت تخفق الرياح فيه أحب إلي من قصر منيف، ولبس عباءة وتقر عيني أحب إلي من لبس الشفوف. So every time we finish a lunch or a dinner and he's waiting for kunafa, we would sing: لصحن كنافة وتقر عيني أحب إلي من أكل الصفوف. As Bilal said, he used to love Arabic language and Fusha, and he used to speak Fusha most of the time. We went once, me and Makram, he was looking for a car in the south, and we went to a restaurant in the south. There was a young waiter, and he ordered Diet Coke. So the waiter said, "We don't have Diet Coke, I'm sorry." He said, "It's fine, just get a regular Coke." But then the waiter left for a while, came back with a Diet Coke, and he asked him, "Min ayna laka hadha?" To which the young waiter said, "Hadha min fadli Rabbi." And Professor Abu-Husayn used to tell this story over and over again. I'm gonna read this in Arabic, something I wrote when we lost Professor Abu-Husayn. طلب مني مرة أن آتيه بسلة من صيدا. بكون صيدا فيها سلال بعد، فيك تجيب لي سلة؟ في موسم التين جاءته سلة ملأى فأضاعها بعد أن فرغت. كنت حديث عهد ببيروت وحديث عهد به وبطبيعته الساخرة. ساعيا لإرضاء أستاذي الجديد صاحب الطبع الكريم طلبت سلة من والدي فأحضر 2. وصلت إلى مكتبه حاملا السلتين، وما أن رآني حتى انفجر ضاحكا، تلك الضحكة التي يتردد صداها يوميا في رواق الطابق الرابع من الكوليدج هول. هيك جيت من صيدا حامل السلتين مثل دوايك يا دوايك. لما وصلت على بيروت صبحتها قلت لها صبحك بالخير ستنا بيروت. واستمر في ضحكه وسخريته حتى وصلنا إلى بيت الصليب للغداء، وأعاد عليه القصة وضحكا كثيرا، ضحكا من الابن الصيداوي الجديد. الذي يبدأ رحلة جديدة، رحلة أراد لها النجاح بكل صدق وإخلاص. وأنا الآن كل مرة أنظر إلى بيروت أقول صبحك بالخير ستنا بيروت.
This brings many memories. Abid was never jealous of anyone, really. He really taught me how to be a colleague at AUB, and for this I'll be ever grateful. Nadia, his colleague, whom he loved really dearly, he always would tell me, Nadia is my closest colleague. And when I would ask him why, and he would say, because she loves you to succeed. He loved you dearly, Nadia. And your turn.
I met him when I was 16. It was the fall of 1981. I was a freshman. I met him in Dr. Saikaly's office, I think. In any case, I was assigned his class by accident, History 101. We were all required to take this class. And while I didn't choose him at that moment, I didn't know him really, after that, I chose him repeatedly. And throughout my undergraduate years, I took repeatedly many courses with him. When I returned as an assistant professor, and I was still a bit young, and because he was the younger person in the faculty in history in particular, I would converse with him and perhaps confide in him a little bit. And he would often remind me later on, much later on, about the time when, he would tell me, do you remember when you came back and you said that you want to be treated like a colleague and not like an ex-student, a former student, that I would want Professor Salibi and Saikaly and Dr. Abdul Rahim to treat me as a student and not as a colleague and not as a student. And we used to laugh about it, Abd and I, because it was quite daring on my part, I would say, but also it was a bit silly. Of course, I was going to remain their student. He was an intellectual giant in his field, for sure, as it's evident from his scholarship, but he was also extremely well read, and that was also a particular feature of Abd. He read extensively in English and in Arabic, and we often would exchange titles of books and novels. And if I were to describe him in one word, I think that word would be loyalty. was very loyal. And he was loyal to the core, and he was incredible at building this sense of loyalty with the people around him, sort of anyone around him. A certain kind of loyalty that has also a mix of deep friendship, and it's sort of a very unique thing that was هذه خلطة عبد الرحيم, and nobody else really can do it. Abdul Rahim was generous, and not only generous in his giving, he was also generous with his time and with his love. And in the last years, there were long years of suffering. He suffered as much as the Prophet Job suffered, really, in his health, and he had to endure surgery after surgery. My husband George, who couldn't be here today, he has to be inside that for an emergency, but he would go with him in his surgeries, go to the surgery with him and be with him when he wakes up in the recovery. And sometimes, as soon as he would be out of the recovery, I would go and see him in the hospital room. And so he would survive one surgery after the other, and each time he would emerge triumphantly in the hospital room with a tired face but a booming smile, like, I've survived this one again. Sorry, he didn't survive the last one, but he was truly a survivor given all that had happened to him. I'm in his office today. I've been relocated to his office, and today his office was filled with his people. I wish it could always be filled with his people. Thank you.
Abed always told me he loves you dearly, but he loves George even more. There was a special relationship between him and George. And I learned from Abed. All these people know Abed way before me. I actually never studied with Abed, right? I became his friend when I joined AUB in 2009. But I learned that the depth of the relationship is not with time, it's not time. Time is a factor, right? But it's the sincerity, the loyalty, the love that's in the relationship. And how fitting it is to also introduce Charles. Because I introduced Charles to Abdulrahim probably 1 year or 1 year and a half, 3 years, 3 years and a half before his death. But really, the depth of the relationship is remarkable. Please, Charles.
Thank you, Bilal. Shortly before coming back to Beirut from Istanbul to undergo his last operation, Ustaz Abed and I visited the Topkapi Sarai in May 2022. During the last 2.5 years of his life, after dear Bilal introduced me to him, I was fortunate to have been his last disciple and to have walked in his steps and received his guidance. This was a privilege. I saw Istanbul in his eyes and traveled several times to a city that became his second home, especially a refuge from the decrepitude of his beloved Lebanon and Beirut, and to alleviate sometimes his pain when he saw what was happening in Beirut and Lebanon. I tried to Turkify Mahzala by pronouncing it Mahzalet, and this would make him laugh. His life exemplified the complexity of the Near East, and he embodied the old Roman notions of gravitas and dignitas, authority, in both his character and scholarship, with love. He also embodied the pivotal role AUB played in shaping the free minds of the region. His scholarship is a reminder, especially to Lebanese, that their future also depends on historical awareness and understanding, as dear Makram once said. Alongside this gravitas, few knew that Professor Abu-Husayn also possessed a profound sense of humor, and his punchlines, sarcasm, funny stories are nothing short of une rareté littéraire. I vividly recall how happy he was to be in Topkapi. As we progressed from one courtyard to pavilion, he brought back to life the sultans, the viziers, and of course the divan meetings. Yet something rather symbolic occurred on this last visit. Ustaz Abed stopped and stood facing both Divan al-Hamayun, the imperial council, and Bab Saadi, the gate of felicity. In a gesture of the hand and with his deep yet serene and joyful voice, he said, "Farewell, Grand Vizier." And we went back to the city. This farewell was highly symbolic, as if he knew that this would be the last time he would be in the abode of felicity, Istanbul, the heart of the civilization he studied and made accessible to all of us. His love for discovery meant that he always asked me to take him on road trips in Lebanon. These road trips, many of which were nothing short of academia in motion, and added depth to my academic training. As an outsider and as his last disciple, I am left with a solid bond with his disciples, who are nothing short of brothers, who have been supporting my academic journey and still do. For this new family, I am thankful to him. Today, as we recall the memory of the man we called Al-Muallim, we honor his legacy as Sultan, a title bestowed upon a humble scholar by his disciple, who walked in his steps in recognition of his significant role in shaping their minds, careers, and lives. أفندم سلطانم أستاذي فليكن ذكرك مؤبد. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I have no words to introduce Makram Rabah, really. He was a family member, indeed. Makram.
شكرا بلال. صراحة أنا ما كتبت شيء وما أفكر شو بدي أقول لأنه صعبة ولا هي مني أحكي. بطلع هلا بتدوروني بتحطوني على التي في بحكي لكم ساعة. بس عادة لما أكون عم بحكي عن ناس ما بحبهم أو ما بحب الوضع اللي نحن فيه، بس أنا عم بحكي عن شخص بحبه. بسنة 2000 كان سمستر لإلي بالجامعة الأمريكية، تعرفت على عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين عبد بالكوليدج هول هون. سألته إنه أنا حابب أسجل معك بصفك اللي هو الهيستوري 245 اللي هو لسخرية القدر، صرت أنا علمه. بالأصل عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين قال لي أنت هلا رح تاخده عني، لأنه نحن I introduced صف بيعلم ما بعد جرون ليبون، هو بده يتقاعد وبده يسلمنا مثل ما بيقولوا الشعري. خدت معه هيدا الصف وما كان يعرف أنا مين وأنا شو. سألني مرة أنت شو؟ بمعنى أنت بأي طائفة بتنتمي؟ قلت له أنا زنديق. صار يضحك. هو كان يفكرني إنه أنا شيعي لأنه قال بلفظ كلمة الإمام علي مزبوطة. قلت له لا أنا درزي، وانبسط فيه أكثر لأنه كمان مهتم كنت بتاريخ لبنان. بضحك بالموضوع إنه كل العالم كانوا مقتنعين إنه عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين من جماعتنا درزي، لأنه بيكتب عن الدروز، ولأنه كمان كان ينبسط لما يعرف إنه حدا من الجبل ويخبره قصص عن ضيعته بيست على الارشيف اكثر ما الناس بتعرفها. ولدرجه انه مره كنت فايت لعنده لقيته عم بعيط على تلميذ يا ما عامل امتحان يا ساقط وهو قاطع، عيطت له باسمه قال لي بتعرفوا لهذا؟ قلت له ايه هذا بخصنا. عيط له قال له ليه ما قلت لنا انت من جماعتنا؟ هيك قال له بتيجي بتعمل ميك اب وبتعمل منيح. سمعت بيضحك بالموضوع انه دكتور عبد لما عملنا العمليه وكان لازم يعملها لانه هذا قرار اخذناه، لانه اذا ما عملها كان رح يموت كمان. 14 ساعة من أصعب العمليات اللي بتنعمل، ودكتور عبد صح وفات على الريكفري روم، وأنا فت لعنده وبلغته قلت له إن شاء الله بعد جمعة بتكون بالبيت والتينات تبعولك. هو مات 23 جون، تعرفوا التين بياخد وقت ليخلص، بس في تينة وحدة بإباع لدكتور عبد أول أطفي دائما لإله، وهو انبسط. يعني كنا ناطرين إنه بناكل تين. للأسف أنا كنت آخر واحد فوق راسه لما مات، لأنه كنا عارفين رح نوصل لهون، بس كنا عم نجرب قد ما فينا نماطل. أنا كنت مع دكتور عبد سنة 2012 لما he was inducted على Turkish Historical Society اللي هن الامورتلز، يعني اللي هو شرف ما بينعطى عادة لكثير من العرب، وهو أصر إنه يكون أنا موجود معه ودفع لي التيكت والإقامة. كنت وقت راجع من أمريكا، وصلت على البيت، ضبيت أخذت أغراضي ورجعت طرت على اسطنبول. كنا موجودين على قصر أحد قصور السلاطين على البوسفور بقعدة يعني رائعة. وبحب لكم إنه مع إنه كان في كتير أشخاص نحن يعني بنحلم فيهم وبنقرأ عنهم، منهم كاربات ومنهم إنالجيك وكل هول، بس دكتور عبد كان من أهمهم. ولما حطوا له القفطان، وهيدي أهم، أنا ولا مرة عيطت له السلطان، كنت عيط له معلمي، وهيدا اللقب هو أخذه بعد ما توفى دكتور الصليبي. كان هيك في كتير قصص نقولها عنه لعبد الرحيم أبو-حسين. أهم شيء أنا برأيي هو الكرم. هو ما بيحكي عن الكرم المادي، لأن الكرم المادي ما بيخلص. علمنا إنه دائما، وهذا شيء أنا كنت بعرفها لأنه ربيت عليها بالكشاف، إنه دائما الصغير بيحترم الكبير والكبير بيحمي الصغير. وهيك كان دائما يعمل، وتلاميذه هيك بيعملوا. مرة سليمان عيط علي لما كنا عم بجرب ادفع قهوة ببوسطن، قال لي لا أنا أكبر منك، وذكرني بالكود اوف كوندكت اللي نحن معلمين عليه. غير إنه اللي ذكرنيه إنه مكتبه ما بيخلى وبضله مفتوح، وبيته كمان. وبنفس الوقت أنا كل ما أكتب شيء بفكر فيه. هلا أنا لعنة لبنان ورثتها، وأنا لأنه بشتغل شغله لعبد الرحيم أبو-حسين حسيت بشيء مش حلو لما سافرت لروح على جورج تاون. أنا معود إنه الهيستوري ديبارتمنت هو كمال صليبي وعبد الرحيم أبو-حسين. بجورج تاون ما فيك عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين وكمال صليبي، لأنه الأستاذ بيجي بداوم، وعادة ما بيكون عنده مكتب لإله، بيتقاسموا مع حدا تاني وبيفل. بس أنا أساتذتي كانوا راح يضلون عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين وكمال صليبي، مش لأنه علموني بالكتاب، لأنه علموني برات الكتاب. وأنا قلتها، أنا اللي تعلمته على البلكون عن كمال صليبي أنا وعم بشرب ويسكي أكثر بكتير من اللي ممكن نتعلمه بأي كتاب. والأهم من هيك بيعلموك شو يعني واحد يكون لبناني يكون راس بيروتي. مشان هيك لما اسمع الأغبياء اللي عم يحكوا هلا أو بيجربوا يقولوا مين اللبناني ومين مش اللبناني، ويقولوا دي ان اي وما دي ان اي وتاريخ وابوريجينالز وكل هذا الحكي وكل هذا الهراء، بتخيل انه في حدا لبناني اكثر من عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين اللي خلق بنوبة بفلسطين ومات بالجامعة الأمريكية. مرة كنت أنا وياه عم نسجل البيت اللي قدم على قرض للإسكان، كنت أنا وياه على الدورة، والشخص اللي عم يسجل له البيت أخذ هويته. قال له نوبة، أنا وصغير كان عندي طوابع أنقذوا آثار النوبة. قلت له دكتور هذا الأهبل فكرك من السودان. قال لي يا خي اتركه، هلا بدي اقعد اشرح له وين النوبة وين. شخص خلق بالنوبة، درس بالأردن، طلع أول على صفه، اجى على لبنان درس على أساس بده يتعلم إنجليزي ويروح يعلم، صار من أهم مؤرخين عن تاريخ لبنان، وأنقذ لبنان والتاريخ اللبناني من الضلال. وفوت مدرسة أو كفى مدرسة مبلشها كمال صليبي، وكمال صليبي أعاد كتابة تاريخ لبنان بناء على أبحاث تلميذه عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين. إن شاء الله نكون عقدر هذه الذكريات، وشو ما قلنا ما بنقدر نكافي عبد الرحيم أبو-حسين، وما بنقدر نشبهه إلا بالشجرة الموجودة قدام الويست هول يلي بتعطينا ظل وبتعطينا حماية وبتذكرنا إنه ما في حدا أهم من المحبة والكرم يلي قدمنا إياهم. شكرا لكم.
شكرا كتير مكرم.
على سيرة الويسكي عشان نغير الجو، يعني كان دكتور صليبي من ألقابنا العديدة لما بده يحكي مع دكتور أبو-حسين عني أو عن مكرم يقول له ابنك المتمدن عشان بيشرب معه ويسكي، وابنك الحيط عشان ما بيشرب معه ويسكي.
The most beautiful thing about Abdulrahim was building a community, right? And I do feel the community here in this room. When He took me as an adopted son. These became my brothers, my family. And I always come to them when I need something. He really did build this community. So thank you, Makram. Abid's long-standing colleague was Dr. Samir Saikaly. تفضل. I have so many stories about your adventures during the war, your travels when the airport was closed. I could write a book about these stories. Please.
I was told by my boss that the teachers, when they stop teaching, lose their voice. So kindly excuse my voice because I've somewhat lost a few things, other things as well. The greatest loss, of course, was my friend, Professor Abu-Husayn. I always called him Professor Abu-Husayn. I'd like to extend my condolences to his son and to just report to you that whenever he spoke about you, it was with a sense of hope and gratitude to have a son like you. I really don't know what to say. Losing Abdul Rahim was a shock. But a few years before, the other shock was the loss of Professor Salibi. I'd like to tell you about the fact that in both instances, I was not in town. I was in Washington. The person who communicated the fact of the death of Salibi, as well as Dr. Abu-Husayn, was Makram, Rabah, who spoke on the telephone. And I usually now think that Mr. Rabah is likely to find it difficult to report my own death to me. Allah يخليه. The fact of the matter is it's extremely difficult to lose people with whom I've spent a lifetime. I knew Professor Abu-Husayn as a student, finishing, I think, his MA in sociology. Anthropology. That's when I first met him. It must have been middle 60s or late 60s. I got to know him then as a student of history, and I saw him, like some of you have experienced, the way in which Professor Abu-Husayn grew to become an authority on the Lebanon, inspired, of course, by Dr. Kamal Salibi. The AUB, the history department at the AUB truly was one family. And the line goes back all the way to, I don't know, hundreds of you here were once part of the family that we called the history department. All that one hopes is that it continues to prosper under the leadership of Dr. Sadr. We've regained the dean, and what more do we need? And I deeply feel the loss of Dr. Abu-Husayn. I remember speaking to him about the danger involved in what he was trying to do, namely to do an operation with the foreknowledge that it is not likely to succeed. I must tell you that he told me this fact with courage. It's incredible that throughout this period of difficulty that he continued to be the nice guy he always was. There was no fear in what he was, in what he must have faced. I just hope that you will continue to remember him, and that you will find out that in remembering, you bring him back to life. He really is not dead, so long as we think of him. And I am grateful for the opportunity of having had him as my student, my colleague, and my friend. And I wish success to the remainder of the faculty who are alive and keeping the department going. And I hope you'll continue to invite me to your parties. And Makram will be in touch with me. To that effect. Thank you very much.
Tariq couldn't be here, but he sent a text which I will read. Contribution, Tariq Contribution to In Search of the Sultan. I'm delighted to be here with you all in spirit at least, remembering our dear departed colleague Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn. I first met Abd in Oxford in the late 1980s when he accompanied the late Kamal Salibi on a visit to the then new Lebanese Studies Center established in partnership with St. Anthony's at the initiative of Albert Hourani. We had a long, and for me at least, wonderfully informative discussion of the importance of Ottoman local history. And I heard much about the history, Fakhreddin's allies, the Consul Ghazawi, ancestor of the Ghazawi clan now settled in my native Irbid, and much intermarried with my own clan. I continued to hear Abid's news and even met him once or twice. Once Kamal Salibi decamped to Amman and became a regular visitor to my parents' house, as well as the companion of my father and Khaldoun Sata al-Husri for political coffees in the Amman Intercon. However, our relationship really took off when my wife, Jocelyn de Jong, accepted a post in the FHS in 2005, and I began to visit Professor Salibi regularly in Abid's company. These meetings quickly evolved into long lunches, with Abid invariably choosing Socrates as the waiters were in his pocket and he could grab the bill. The lunches went on after I joined Kames in 2012, and it is impossible to convey how solicitous Abid was and how helpful in helping me integrate into AUB life, particularly since I had been away from academia for some time. However, Abid was not simply a fount of knowledge in all things Ottoman, from the genealogy of the Jumblats to Young Turk relations with Druze in Hauran. Having lived in Beirut for more than half a century, arriving in the Golden Age, living through the Civil War and post-Ta'if reconstruction, he seemed to know everything about and a good chunk of everyone in Lebanese politics. Even more exciting for me was his knowledge of the ins and outs of Beirut's intellectual life, and having sat for so long at Salibi's feet, he had also inherited a vast store of Ras Beiruti history and lore. I pressed him to record all this and was delighted that he finally agreed to write his memoirs, perhaps encouraged by the example of his old AUB chum, Fath al-Bis, the proprietor of Dar al-Shuruq in Amman. He always added that he would do this after securing the future of his niece Hiba and navigating the medical procedure that loomed over him in the last years of his life. It was one of the saddest moments of my time at AUB when Bashar Haidar called me to let me know of Abed's passing. And this a day after I received an email from him scheduling another lunch. I console myself, however, with the thought that the arrival of Tariq will maintain the chain of transmission isnad that leads back through Abed to Professor Salibi and keeps alive the memory of those golden days both spoke of so eloquently. Long may Tariq follow in the steps of the Sultan, and long may we gather to remember his father, a first-class historian, superb luncheon companion, and a wonderful human being. Our last scheduled speaker, because you might want to share your own memories of Abed, is Alexis Wick, who traveled especially from Istanbul to be here with us. Ali? For many years, we met in Abed's office and had coffee there and a piece of chocolate.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to also begin by thanking the organizers and Bilal in particular for their efforts in producing this wonderful volume and in gathering us today for this mournful but joyful moment together. I pride myself for a facility with words and with writing as a general rule, and like many of us before me today, as I sat to write this, I was at a complete loss for words. In short, Abed and the rest of the crew at the History and Archaeology Department at AUB allowed for me to have the most wonderful transition from being a graduate student to being a member of this guild. And I'm forever grateful to them all, and to Abed in particular for that. It's a beautiful gift because it's a difficult transition. And he was assigned to me, I think it was a new procedure at the university, as a mentor. And he'd laugh about it, as he did about so many things, for being a bureaucratic, useless bureaucratic paraphernalia. But he really was one, as is clear from what everybody has said today. I too am a historian. I too happen to be an Ottomanist historian, so I had a particular bond and a particular admiration for him in that regard. But the way I remember him the most is as an adib, as a Renaissance man almost, and with an enormous, an eclectic, an encyclopedic love of beautiful things, of people too, as many have said, but also of culture and knowledge more largely. And here I owe also the organizers, the editors of the volume, an apology, and again a testament to my loss for words. Before his passing, I had convinced him to, Sheikh Abed that is, I had convinced him to sit for interviews, which I conducted with him over a series of months, with the aim of appending it to the volume. And after the news came of his tragic passing, I couldn't go back to them. But I promise that I will one day. As an adib, his office was a majlis, literary salon. Professor Sadr mentioned it. Was so true. But what transpired in these interviews is that this love of knowledge, this encyclopedic love of knowledge, was also something that he carried with him from his earliest youth. He was transdisciplinary avant la lettre, in a way, and without any fanfare. He almost despised the term, I think I can say with some confidence, but he exuded it in remarkable ways. Most notably by his love of literature, obviously. Evelyn Waugh, David Lodge. He claims to have invented Ibrahim Nasrallah, and I'm sure it's true. But he told me stories of his childhood in Nuba, in a, at the time, very small village in the vicinity of Al-Khalil in Palestine. And he described how he would leave school with books from the school library, and he would love to go. His father had, or his family had, some land in the village, and there was a little cave on the land, and a fig tree next to the cave. And it's funny that Makram would have brought up some figs too. And he loved that cave where they would keep hay in the winter months, notably. And he would take his books and go sit in the cave on his parents' land and read his books next to the fig tree. That's how I imagine him now, actually. And when the land was to be distributed among the heirs, the only thing that he claimed, or this is what he told me, Annie, the only thing that he claimed, and then only to forego it later, the only thing that he claimed as an inheritance was that little piece of land with a cave where they would keep hay and the fig tree. He also loved cinema greatly and eloped from school, almost failing one of his high school years for going to the cinema that had opened recently in a neighboring town. But most remarkably, he was also a historian's historian, I want to say, with an uncanny ability to find himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, which he always lived with enormous resilience and serenity and good humor. He left his hometown, his home village, for Amman in late May or early June 1967, just to find work for the summer, and found himself on the other side now of a border all of a sudden. He graduated high school from Jordan with performing brilliantly with the aim of coming to AUB in the late summer, September 1970. Also a historical moment. He visited Istanbul in I think for the first time, just around 1980, when one of the many military coups took place in Turkey. And finally, and there are many more, I'm sure, he completed his dissertation of all moments in the summer here at AUB in the summer of 1982 in Ras Beirut. Another thing I think that made him truly a adib and a Renaissance man was that he was always impeccably dressed. And I always admired him for his love of beautiful beings. He loved food, he loved drink, he loved people. And just to conclude now, I'd like to convey to you the words of his dear friend and old friend and fellow Ottomanist colleague who was mentioned by Michael also, Engin Akarlı, who is in Istanbul, and passes this message to you all and to us, and to dear Abid, of course. I wish I could join you in Beirut to commemorate my brother Abid. I couldn't get used to his absence. How rejoiced I would become when he came to Istanbul and we planned to get together to discuss certain academic and intellectual issues while engaging in some academic gossip along the way. He was a kind, bright, and humorous soul, and may he rest in peace.
Abid chose this jacket that I'm wearing today, by the way, from Kigilli, from one of his favorite stores in Istanbul. The floor now is for other memories of Abid. Please feel free to use the microphone or to come here on stage. Anyone wants to share a story, memory, line? Please. Ta. علشان لا. Please.
Hello everyone. Hassan Bashasha, I'm a student here at AUB, history. I don't know from where to start exactly. I was one of his last students as an undergrad. I took two of his courses while I was still a minor student in history. I don't have like a clear memories of like complete interactions with Dr. Abdul Rahim Abu-Husayn. However, I do remember some things. For example, I was with him and Sheikh Hayek, and I remember telling him, there was something going on in Beirut, something related to gun. Someone was like shooting or something, and Charles asked me, where do you live, and is it nearby, and we can take you or something. And so I said, I live here in Raytim. And so Dr. Abdulrahim said, yeah, me too, yalla halla, it's nearby. فhe told me where in Raytim, I told him in Al Street. I told him this is not Raytim. And so I couldn't help, when you were saying something about his honesty, and I remember he said this, he was very honest, and it stuck. Since this day, I never said again I do live in Raytim. No, I live in Al Street. So خلاص هيك it stayed. Also I do actually believe that the reason why I'm doing an MA now in history is because of Dr. Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn. I'm not just saying this to say this. I used to like history, but after meeting Dr. Abdulrahim Abu-Husayn, even though in the last years, the two courses, he wasn't giving all the classes, part of them, Charles was giving the classes, but I do remember, when his time was for him, when he started speaking about the Ottoman Empire, or when he started giving the class, I don't know, there was something about him that خلاص it تسحب someone into liking, his passion about what he's doing is, and it transcends and about novels. I started reading, and I was a business student, I wasn't into reading ever, up until I started taking history course I took with Dr. Makram, and that's where I actually started reading. But I remember, no, I wasn't very into novels up until Dr. Abdul Rahim brought up the book My Name is Rad in class. And from this day, like I remember like reading the book, and up until now, this book and Istanbul, Memoir and the City of Orhan Pamuk are my two favorite books, novels, and I keep on like why I like reading novels is like it was an advice from Dr. Abdul Rahim, read novels because it's good for, it will make you more creative. And now I read novels not just only for the sake of the advice, but also for the fact that I actually like reading novels, and you know what I mean? And one last thing, I can't help it but say this, I see that, all of you are talking about the lunches and the experiences with Dr. Abdul Rahim. Even though I wasn't here to experience this because I only took undergrad courses with him, I have to say this, but I'm very grateful that I'm actually living the same thing with Dr. Tariq. عن جد يعني. So someone has to say this. That's actually, Dr. Tariq is literally, he's like Dr. Abdul Rahim, and all the students around, and his students are always around him. The things that we learn from him, we actually learn from him outside the classes, and I'm very happy that I'm actually experiencing the things that all of you guys experienced with Dr. Abdul Rahim. And I actually, like, I'm happy to say that the history department is something different. عن جد alhamdulillah, I say, I have the opportunity to actually be part of this department. And it's a whole, my life before entering history is not the same now. I'm very grateful for that's it. Hello. Thank you.
It's very true, and Abid brought me to I was always called the friend of the department. I was even included in Helen's summer party, right? So as a friend of the department. And yeah, history as a way of life too. It's absolutely beautiful. And about honesty, I have a story. He often told me, Abdul Rahim is like, yeah, I saw your car and I wanted to scratch it. Like, there's no filter, whatever comes to his mind, he says it. So, anyone else? Please.
Hello everyone, so I'm Sarah. I'm currently writing my thesis as an MA student in the history department. I wanted to share this story because I'm very grateful to Dr. Abdul Rahim about it. So I was doing the minor in my undergrad studies in history. And then I decided to do an MA in history, so I applied and I got the offer. It was my last semester at AUB. I was an engineering student. And for multiple reasons, I had to decline the offer. But I still felt so bitter about it. So it makes me sad to remember it. It was like a couple of days after the semester started, and I met Dr. Abdul Rahim near Furn Abdul Aziz. And after exchange, I was with my mother, and after exchanging the highs and how are you and so on, he said, "No, you don't want to join the department." I said to him, "I can't because the semester already started and I did not accept the offer on time and so on." He said, "If you want to do it, I can help you with it. You can be accepted." I told him, "How? I mean, I want to. Now I regret that I did not accept the offer." I said, "I can do it for you," and sent me an email with all the details and the application number and so on. And 2 weeks into the semester, I joined the class with Dr. Wick. I don't know if he remembers. You had already given 2 seminars. I joined with at the third week of the semester. I don't know how it happened, but I just accepted another offer and I joined the department, and it was like one of the best things anyone had ever done to me. And like I have many, many memories of Dr. Abdulrahim's humor and so on, but I think the time does not allow for this. But this is something that I'm very grateful that I have to share it with every one of you. Thank you so much.
So one more time, I would like to remind you to get a copy of the book, which is being sold at a discounted price here, but also the book, as like all the books in this series, are open access, downloadable for free from the AUB website. I also would like to, in addition to the University Press, one more time, I would like to thank Emily for her long companionship of Abdulrahim and for her work on this book and other projects also of Abid. Abid was also, please, yes. Abid was also a strong supporter of the University Press. He has published several volumes in the press, although I know as his friend that he received offers to publish these books from prestigious publishers. But AUB always came first to him, right? And he always believed in the press. This is why we wanted also this volume to come out from the University Press. I also would like to thank Aida Abbas for helping organizing this event, for booking the tickets, and for always being so thoughtful. Also with Abid, she always made him, coffee, made him welcome in the Arabic department. He really loved her also deeply. Thank you all. Abid helped building a community. May we always remain this community that he wanted us to be, and may his memory live long. Thank you.